From the JCCCW's Photograph Archive, a look back at Seattle's Nihonmachi, Japantown, between the early 1900s and 1942. According to the 1940 U.S. Census, the Japanese population in Seattle was nearly 7,000. The origins of Nihonmachi go back to 1891, when a city map would show that what is now called Dearborn Street was then called Mikado Street. After Jackson Street was regraded in 1908, the Japanese moved from Pioneer Square east along Jackson and Yesler. By the 1920s, the center of Nihonmachi was 6th and Main. Nihonmachi today is roughly bordered by 4th and 7th and Main and Jackson Street. It used to spread several blocks from Main Street and 6th Avenue, where the Panama Hotel is located. In the 1890s, early Japanese immigrants found they could get work and a place to stay on Yesler Way in Pioneer Square. There was not much resistance from other local residents. In those days, Yesler Way was called Skid Road because logs were skidded down to the sawmills near the shore of Elliott Bay. Sailors, loggers, and sawmill hands got together at saloons and cheap lodging around the area. As the number of Japanese grew, the community expanded beyond Yesler to Weller, King, Jackson, Main, and Washington streets. The photographs in this video record the development of Japantown on these streets, the development of businesses, and the establishment of churches, organizations, and other social activities prior to 1942. This picture of a Japanese immigrant was taken in 1894. The earliest immigrants like him were called Issei, translating to the first generation, and they arrived between 1890 to 1910. The first wave of immigrants were young men. Many found work at railroads, farms, and sawmills, like this one in Mukilteo. Whatever work they could find required hard labor for meager wages. During the early settlement, an arranged marriage was the easiest way for Issei men to find a suitable wife to bring to America and start a family. They would visit Japan once to find a bride, or have a picture bride arrangement by exchanging photographs without seeing each other in person. Picture brides arrived mainly between 1908 and 1920, and they can be seen here waiting to pass through immigration after arriving by ship. These brides and Issei men started families in the U.S., just like this couple posing in front of a house. This picture was taken in Mukilteo, north of Seattle, in 1905. This is Kazuo Mori, the first Japanese American born in Mukilteo. This picture was taken in 1911. This is a panoramic view of Seattle in 1890. This map, which was illustrated in 1891, includes the area currently called the Chinatown International District. Notice that south of King Street was tideland, and there were high ridges between First Hill and Beacon Hill. The 6th Avenue trestle extended southward from King Street into the Tidewater. This shows the city as it looked in 1908, from a vantage point slightly south of today's Seattle Uwajimaya location, on 5th Avenue and South Lane Street, looking northward. This is a northeastward view from the 6th Avenue trestle and shows the buildings on pilings. This image looks to the east from Jackson and 5th in 1900. The Japanese signs on the left read restaurants, Naniwate and Futaba. In 1908, Seattle City engineers wanted to fill the tideland to create a large industrial site and to lower the high ridge between First Hill and Beacon Hill. Dirt from the ridge was carted off to the tidelands and fulfilled both purposes. This process of raising or lowering the ground is called regrading. This picture was taken from Weller and Maynard. In 1920, this intersection at 6th Avenue and Main Street was the busiest spot of Japantown. From this intersection in a 3-block radius was an area filled with Japanese businesses, including laundries, cafes, social halls, and trading companies. Built in 1909, Nippon Theater was one of the most important gathering places, where attendees enjoyed theater, music performances such as kabuki, and community events. Astor Hotel was located in the same building. At Nippon, there was a special event which hosted a Christian gathering with evangelist Tsurin Kanamori, and performances like this by Miyashita Orchestra. Near Nippon, there was a large bookstore called Mitsuado. This photo of the NP Hotel was taken in 1918. NP Hotel's guests included the Tokyo Giants, a professional baseball team, and Takarazuka Revue, an all-women's theatrical troupe. The Panama Hotel was built in the heart of Japantown by Japanese architect Saburo Ozasa in 1910 and still operates as a hotel. There was Japanese-style public bath, or sento, in its basement until 1950. In the old days, a sento served as a gathering place for the community, both in and outside of Japan. Here, people relaxed in the bath and interacted with country people after work or school every day. There used to be hundreds of Japanese bathhouses in the US, but this is the only one that is preserved intact today. During World War II, people of Japanese ancestry were forced to relocate to incarceration camps as enemy aliens. They were only allowed to take 2 suitcases and 1 sea bag. Some people left their belongings that they couldn't take at businesses around Nihonmachi. This included the Panama Hotel. Some of them didn't return to pick them up. The hotel displays them today. On Jackson Street, there are several old buildings still remaining. This is the Bush Hotel in 1927. This building is still standing on the corner of Jackson and Maynard. The building next to the Bush Hotel housed the Welcome Hotel Annex and Aiko Photo Studio in 1920. Another shot of this building in 1917 shows the Yamatoya clothing store's sign. At the southwest corner of Jackson and 6th Avenue, Japanese doctors had offices in 1917. Also, Sanyo 10-cent store, Gosho Drugs, and Jackson Street Sanitary Barber were in this building. Across from Jackson, the Governor Apartments are still standing. In 1917, Alaska Grill, Main Shulo Restaurant, Oriental Optical, and Harade Dry Goods Store were there. The former Rainier Heating and Power Building at Maynard housed the JACL office. In 1926, this building at 6th Avenue and King Street housed Asakura Jewelry, Togo Meshiya, or Eatery, and Sun Express. At the northeast corner of 5th and Weller, across King from today's Uwajimaya location, was Waste Laundry. Rainier Heat and Power's plant was just below this. The Murakamis started the Higo 10-cent store in 1909, and the store used to be on Weller Street in Nihonmachi. In these store windows, pots and pans, tubs, broomsticks, dustpans, Japanese fans, and others are displayed along with the American flag. Now called Higo Variety Store, it's located at Jackson and 6th. Issei men working in their shops in dark vests and shirt sleeves, and Issei women bowing to one another and chatting in Japanese were typical scenes of Nihonmachi. Miyagawa Company sold Japanese goods and groceries at 653 Weller. There were bottles and cans displayed in the shop windows. This is an interior photo of the Japanese Commercial Bank. An Issei businessman, Masajira Furuya, founded it in 1907. Furuya made his way up to a banker and merchant from a tailor after he settled in Seattle. His bank filled a critical role in the Japanese community for 24 years as the only bank in the Northwest that would cater to Japanese clientele. It went bankrupt during the Great Depression. This photo features Taihoko Nippo, one of the Japanese newspaper companies and its employees. A leader of the Japanese community, Genji Mihara, and waiter Sakao Ojima are posing in Mihara's restaurant, Occidental Cafe. Genji instructed his staff to give free soup to those who couldn't pay. His restaurant was located in today's Occidental Square in the Pioneer Square neighborhood. Owner Takuji Sato is standing at the original Maneki restaurant, which was located near 6th and Yesler. A 3-storied structure resembling a Japanese castle can be seen in the upper left of this photo. This photo features Star Laundry, which was at 1229 Jackson Street. According to a yearbook dated 1936, there were nearly 30 Japanese-owned laundry businesses in and around Japantown. Japanese Hospital, formerly Reliance Hospital, was near Jackson and 12th. It was founded by the congregants of the Seattle Buddhist Church. It was a great help for patients who had difficulty speaking English. This photo features Iku Arizumi standing in front of Arizumi Drugstore. The owners, Kiyo and Iku Arizumi, are the first 2 female graduates of the University of Washington School of Pharmacy. This photo features the Tsurukawa brothers posing at Pacific Market located between 12th and 14th on Jackson Street. Churches, both Buddhist and Christian, were very important institutions. Christian churches facilitated assimilation into mainstream American culture. Even for Nisei, who would be fluent in English, Ethnically Japanese churches were preferred due to social barriers in white-dominated America. This is a photo of the Japanese Baptist Church in 1899. It was located at 418 Jefferson Street. Today, the King County Administration Building stands there. The Japanese Baptist Church founded the Women's Home at 12th and Spruce. Its supervisor, Nellie Fife, helped many Japanese women. Unfortunately, after their arrival, some of the picture brides found their husbands were quite different than what they expected. Women running away from their unhappy marriages and widows living in poverty could turn to the Women's Home. In the early 1900s, Seattle was dangerous, and gangs would often use violence to threaten women into prostitution. Some of the concerned community members worked together to rescue them from the brothels and kept them in the women's home until they obtained a decent life. St. Peter's Episcopal Church was on Yesler. Now it is located at King and 16th. This photo features the Japanese Presbyterian Church, located at 116 King Street. It was called Toyo Dendo Kai, or Oriental Evangelistic Society. This photo features the Japanese Methodist Church on Washington Street. Today, it is Blaine Memorial United Methodist Church. Christian churches were popular among Issei, despite the dominance of Buddhism in Japan. But Buddhism also played a key role among the Japanese communities, just as the Seattle Buddhist Church has. This is the Asahi Baseball Team 10 in 1913. In the late 1920s, when many Nisei had become teenagers, organized sports such as baseball and football became very popular. It is remarkable that these Nisei teams equally associated with Caucasian teams in the days of Japanese exclusion. These are the Taiyo football team at Collins Playfield, Seattle's first supervised playground, which is now Wisteria Park, a private parkland. This photo features the Taiyo baseball team at Garfield High School. Many Japanese Americans also learn traditional martial arts. Here are judoists at the Seattle Dojo on Washington and 16th in 1935. Seattle Dojo still exists and nurtures recent generations of judoists. Nisei girls played sports too. This is the Bellevue girls basketball team. The people of Japan have always emphasized the place of origin of one's family. Therefore, Japanese immigrants formed prefectural clubs called Kenjin-kai, such as Hiroshima, Yamaguchi, Fukuoka, Fukushima, and Kagoshima. This is Yamaguchi Kenjin-kai's 20th anniversary event in 1913. Hiroshima Kenjin-kai had this large-scale event to celebrate its establishment in 1936. Kenjin-kai members helped each other immigrate to America and settle, introduced newcomers into social circles, and enjoyed recreational time together. Besides the Kenjin-kai, Issei had clubs for poetry, debate, karate, and numerous other activities. The Japanese American Citizens League was founded in 1929 and is now the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the United States. This picture of the delegation was taken on the Maynard side of the Heat and Power Building when it held its first national convention in Seattle in 1930. Nisei had their own Boy and Girl Scout troops, summer camps, camera clubs, bridge clubs, and social clubs. Here is a photo of the Seattle Girls Club. This is a photograph of the UW Japanese Student Club. There were many events in the Japanese community. This is a photo of the Seattle Buddhist Church's first Bon Odori in 1932. Bon Odori is a traditional dance event held throughout Japan around the Buddhist holidays in the summer called Bon. Nearly 90 years later, the Buddhist church still hosts the annual Bon Odori and draws a huge crowd. In the Sermon Derby, the angler who caught the biggest salmon won. In this photo from 1939, a takamura was the winner with a 68-pound king salmon. Seattle hosted its first Golden Potlatch Parade in 1911 to commemorate the arrival of the steamer Portland with tons of gold during the Klondike Gold Rush. It was canceled once because of rioting, but was reinstated in 1934. The Japanese community participated with this festival float, modeled after a Japanese castle with a young Japanese woman on it in 1939. The matsutake mushrooms are a delicacy in Japanese cuisine and treasured as an autumnal flavor. They grow in the Pacific Northwest as well, and Japanese people go pick them in the fall. This is a photo of a large mushroom contest held at Mitsuwado Bookstore. The signs are for Mrs. Ginko Kinishige's 2 mushrooms, which were 12 and 13 inches in diameter and weighed 3.5 and 4 pounds respectively. Compare them with the LP record at the far left. Community picnics and undokai, which is a sports event, were hosted by kenjinkai, churches, or the Japanese language school. In this game, participants were trying hard to grab sweet rolls that hung from a string with their mouth and run to the goal. In another game, men with something on their head were running in a race. These girls are engaged in a game and nicely dressed people are watching them. Held in Jefferson Park, the Japanese language school's annual undokai was a big event, which the whole Japanese community was looking forward to until it was interrupted by the war. For this event, parents bought new clothes and shoes for their children, and mothers made gorgeous lunches to share with family and friends. The Issei often had a hard time communicating in English and attended English classes. This is a photo of Miss Ada Mahan's English class at Main Street School, taken in 1918. Ada Mahan was a highly respected and beloved educator among her students in the Japanese community. It was also important for Issei women to go to dressmaking and cooking schools to assimilate themselves into Western ways. These are students at Tanaka Dressmaking School, which was located in the Nippon Theater. They also went to learn traditional cultural arts. This is Mrs. Fujikata, the head teacher of Ohara School of Flower Arrangement, and her students. The Nisei, Japanese immigrants' children, went to public schools. They often performed well academically. Many eventually went to universities and increased the education level of the Japanese community. In this photograph, the students are moving to the new Bailey Gatzert School from the Main Street School. Nisei also attended Japanese language schools to learn Japanese language and culture. This is a photograph of the Seattle Japanese Language School in 1908. It was founded in 1902 with 4 students, and was located in a house at Main and Maynard when the photo was taken. This photograph shows the groundbreaking at the current Japanese language school site at Rainier and Weller in 1913. The Issei came together to fundraise, design, and build the Japanese language school as the permanent home for the program. The first building was completed in 1913. The second building was completed in 1917, and at the peak time, enrollment was nearly 1,300 students. The school has endured through war, economic unrest, targeted attacks, and gentrification to remain a landmark of local and national Japanese American history. It is now the oldest operating Japanese language school in the continental United States. Today, the JCCCW operates the Japanese language school and many other programs, and hosts events through which Japanese and Japanese American culture and heritage are preserved and shared with people of all backgrounds. These buildings still serve as a central gathering place in the community. The Japanese American Remembrance Trail map is available free of charge at the JCCCW and other locations in the area. It helps guide visitors explore the historical places in this video. To get to know more about Seattle's Japantown after World War II, visit our virtual exhibits on Genji Mihara and the Hunt Hotel. Please visit our virtual Bunka no Hi webpage and watch our other new videos.